I've come to find out that lawyers marry either other lawyers or anti-lawyers, nurses, teachers, that kind of thing, because it really boils down to, do we want to have arguments for the entirety of our life, or do we want to avoid them? As somebody married to a lawyer, I know which one I signed up for, and it's wonderful, which is why I'm super interested for this conversation. I promise you that lead-in will make a ton of sense. I'm talking today with Laurie Gilbertson. What we're talking about is winning the most important case, courtroom communication tips for life. Laurie's a former New York City sex crimes and organized crime prosecutor, a television legal analyst, an educator, and entrepreneur. She's also the owner of Tribeca Blue Consulting, where she helps professionals communicate with clarity and confidence in their public speaking, their presentations, their trial work, and media appearances. So I'm super happy for us to talk about the courtroom communication strategies that we learn, but how we can apply those to business, how we can apply those to life, how we can talk like a trial lawyer in the best way possible. Laurie, thanks so much for being with us today.
Jordan, thanks so much for having me. With that introduction, I cannot wait to hear more about this whole marriage thing. Can't wait.
There we go. Well, no, my wife's a lawyer. My wife and actually practices, and we met in court, which I'm like, if you ever go on like a cruise ship and they do the newlywed game, my dream is to be in that with my wife, because they're always, how did you meet? And we're just going to say in court, and we're not going to explain that we were the lawyers, and we're just going to leave it there, and we're going to let everybody come up with their own great story. So we've got it all figured out. No, and it's funny, I was going through Laurie's bio beforehand, and she mentioned it sounded like she's busy, which I think is the ultimate, for anybody to do all these things and still be able to make a podcast means you can't be that busy. You have to be properly successful. So I'm excited you're spending some time with us today.
Oh, I, never want to turn down the opportunity for a great conversation. So I'm more than happy to, make lots of time in my schedule, which, may be busy, maybe not as busy, depends on the day, to be here and chat with you, Jordan.
There we go. All right, so let me talk about our last episode, then we'll dive in. Last week, we talked with Aria Feruzmand about creating a win-win-win, how to use referral fees to actually help clients. So having the client, having the referral attorney, and having the referee attorney, so that you can make sure clients get the right legal help that they need the entire way through the process. That being said, I want to dive in because I'm excited about courtroom communication tips for life. Laurie, talk to me about your prosecutor background. As a former prosecutor myself, although not nearly as cool things as you did, what led you to do, what did you do at the office? And then what led you to leave the office to move on from there?
Sure. Well, my very first day in law school, I was sitting in criminal law class, and the professor was talking about a case. And I don't even remember what case it was, but something in my brain just completely lit up. And I thought, this is so interesting. This story is so incredible. And is there a way that I can actually be a lawyer and be involved in this kind of thing while doing justice for people? And that can be my career. And that was my very first day, and it led me down the path to becoming a prosecutor. So I joined the Queens County District Attorney's Office, and it was pretty much my dream job. I wanted to be an advocate. I wanted to be in court. I wanted to be telling these stories, and wanted to really have that lofty purpose of doing justice. How many of us come out of law school with that idea of this is our ideal. This is what we want to do, and that's where I was. So I stayed at the office for 10 years. I started with misdemeanors. My very first, I think the second week in the office, I got handed a file. And you probably know how this goes, Jordan, having had this background as well. And they said, okay, well, judge is on the bench. Your case starts right after lunch. Your witnesses are in the back row. Here's the file. Go. So I don't know if you've had that experience, but it can be a pretty scary one. I hesitate to even, for everybody, right?
No, I mean, for us, it was, now you need to track down the witnesses so they can be here in like 2 hours. They were never ready to go beforehand, but yes.
Yeah, that too. Someone had done that for me, thank goodness,
there
for that
you
day,
go.
But yeah, and so, you just get started, you jump in, you dive in, you start trying misdemeanor cases, shoplifting, more minor cases. And then gradually I moved up in the office, and I was very interested in sex crimes cases and prosecuting those. So I worked on sex crimes, crimes against the elderly, crimes against children, kind of dove right into that. And then ultimately kept working my way up to try some more serious cases involving violent felony crimes as well as organized crime. And you asked why I left. So I'll fast forward 10 years down the line, I thought this would be my career. I thought I would stay in it forever. I really did love what I did and find it so fulfilling and so energizing, so exciting, such a learning experience, and so valuable, and believe the job that prosecutors do when they do it well is so incredibly important and valuable, in our whole system. But about 10 years in, I found myself sitting at a trial, a very serious robbery case that demanded my entire attention, and thinking, I'm not sure I want to do this anymore. And the term burnout had not completely been coined then, but I think that's pretty much what it was. I had about 10 years of just seeing the worst of what people could do to each other. And I had gotten so much out of it. I had learned so much as a trial attorney, and it was just time to move on. And so I recognized it and, took all the great things with it and moved on from there.
It's so interesting you phrase it that way. So I was a prosecutor, my wife was a PD. And so when I say we met in court, we met on opposite sides. And it's so interesting because, like, as you're mentioning, you start out on misdemeanors, you work your way up. So for us, the cases get more and more serious, and same for PDs. Mm-hmm. And I just remember my wife being like, everybody is at that point is just so guilty. Like, by the time you work your way up to those cases, which sounds weird, but it's actually a great thing. You'd rather have a guilty person go through this than force an innocent person to go through the whole experience. But then it was interesting. Like, on day one of doing criminal defense work, I think we had covered a murder hearing for somebody in the afternoon, and then had a traffic ticket in the morning. And you're like, oh, okay, this is, a little bit of a break. So very, different experience not having the same types of cases over and over again. Cause you're right. You do get that, grind down burnout feel.
You do. And I think, there are some people and many people I work with who are so good at compartmentalizing, who were so good at not taking the work home with them and dealing with these very, very emotional, very difficult situations with victims on the one hand, who you're really trying to get justice for, maybe give them some closure, help them move along with their lives. You're dealing with judges who may or may not be giving you a hard time, or maybe giving you a great time and a hard time within the same 5 minutes. You're dealing with opposing counsel. You've got your own witnesses and putting a trial together. You've got to be on, 1,000% to really do your best at it. And I did work with some people who are very good at just shutting that off at the end of the day, at compartmentalizing it, going home, coming back refreshed. I was not one of those people. I took it home with me. I was very emotionally affected by it. And that's just kind of how I was. And that's probably why it led to me maybe being burnt out at a time when maybe other people wouldn't have been.
Well, and especially with sex crimes cases. I mean, look, you try the murder case and there's DNA and it's on video and there's eyewitnesses and they heard the gunshot and they have the GSR testing. And then for some of these sex cases, it's 10 years ago, this happened to me. And now I'm finally comfortable telling people that it happened and there's no other evidence. And it's just do I believe this person? Will a jury believe this person? There's so many of these cases that are the most emotionally draining with the facts that are so tough as well, that it just really sits on people on both sides, prosecution and defense.
Sure. And they really are. And cases with children, what it takes to really get comfortable with the fact that you're going to put a child on the witness stand to tell about probably the most harrowing and difficult thing that has ever happened in their life, and just the emotional relationship you form, and then the actual doing that in court. And it's it can definitely be emotionally draining, for one thing. I think professionally, I wanted to do my job to the utmost, as well as I could possibly do it for everyone. So that took a lot out ultimately. But also, I think some of these cases, and a lot of them I'm sure you've seen too, Jordan, there's no happy ending to any of it.
Right.
You go in a murder case, the person is still gone. In a sex crimes case, they've still suffered. In a robbery case, they may still have been traumatized violently. In a burglary case, they've had their home invaded, their sense of safety completely destroyed. So it's just a matter of I used to try to think of it, I want to make the people's lives who are involved here just a little bit better with what I can do in guiding them through this system that can be so difficult, so foreign, and so scary. And that's where I ultimately want to wind up. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't fix it all, but I could only do what was in my power and control to do.
Well, and I mean, look, there are these cases that are 99% winners no matter who tried them or defended them. There are cases that are 99% losers no matter who did it. But there's so many cases that
Sure.
come down to advocacy. And so I love the fact that you've taken this, how do we take these trial tips to public speaking, to presentations, to trial work, to media appearances? I love that you've taken that advocacy from a consulting standpoint to help more people talk the right way, present the right way. I don't know how you want to phrase it.
Yeah, I think it's present, communicate, advocate, even just
Yeah.
depending on what the situation is, because so much of what we do is both personally and professionally involves persuasion and engagement and education. And so that's where I take these things from 10 years in the courtroom, nearly every single day in New York City, and bring them to people. You know the book, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten? Have you heard of that one?
I have not, but
Oh,
the older I get, the more true it sounds.
I'm going to have to send this to you, Jordan. I'll send you the link. And for your audience, it's called, I think it's Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And it's a list of things that we learn in kindergarten that apply to life. One of them being take a nap at the end of it, in the afternoon, share nicely with people, all these kind of universal truths. And I like to think that, almost everything I need to know and that everyone needs to know about communication can certainly be learned in a New York City courtroom. And that's where I learned it.
There we go. Yeah, I had
Yeah.
my cousin was a social worker or case manager for a while and got thrown out of court by Judge Judy when she was an actual judge. That's her while pregnant, she couldn't sit still. That was her claim to fame. No, but it's
Wow.
true. And I go back, like Dan Pink, To Sell Is Human.
Mhm.
So Dan Pink went to law school. I don't think ever practiced, writes this book
Yeah.
about like, we're all in sales. And it's totally what you said, like the need to be persuasive in modern life.
Mhm.
It's not just to get a jury verdict. It's not just to have a client hire you. It's not just for good marketing. It's convincing your 5-year-old to take the nap. It's convincing your spouse to get pizza instead of Chinese for dinner. Like whatever it is, it comes back to so many of these tips. So
Yeah,
I think it's so cool what you're doing.
thank you. Yeah, it really does. And the more I do it, the more I see that clients will come to me and say, I got this confidence to do this presentation that I worked on with you. I didn't want to do it. I had to do it. My firm made me do it, or my company made me do it, or I had to get out of market and I didn't want to do it. I learned how to do it. And now I feel good. And now when people ask me to do this stuff, like I jump and do it, and it's no longer a barrier. Or even now when, I argue with my spouse about something, I've got some tools in my pocket and, I can use them. So it really ends up, I think most of all, going to people's confidence in being able to communicate and being able to get their ideas out there, being able to share their point of view. And that we do, every single day, all the time.
Well, it's so funny you phrase it that way. So and to take this full circle, my kid will be in kindergarten in August. So the other day he's sitting on my lap while I'm going through some videos of me for social media posts, and a couple of them on a stage talking. And he goes, "Oh my God, like that's so cool. Whoa, were you scared to do that?" And I was like, "No, actually I wasn't, but I do, but the way that you phrase it makes me realize exactly what, you're talking about here, Laurie. Like that's not normal to people, but as I don't know, trial attorneys, as lawyers, as content creators, whatever it is, like I think we take for granted so many of these skills. So I love that you're working to help people, get over that hump and find that confidence.
I think we do. I think, I do work with trial attorneys, and I don't generally work with trial attorneys on public speaking. What I do work with them on is more of a trial coaching, taking the kinds of things I learned trying all these cases and really helping them figure out, the themes of their cases, how to do an opening, how to do a summation, how you want to tell the story of your trial, what's the best way to order your witnesses, what's the best kind of argument that's really going to resonate, that kind of thing. But because I think trial lawyers tend to be we're kind of a unique breed of people who are super comfortable getting up and doing this. And so as I've learned to do this work, I really learned that, like you said, that's not normal. And if you're not a trial lawyer, generally, unless you're super extroverted and you're just one of those people who loves it, most people have some trepidation. And that is so normal. And that is just what I come across all the time. And so I really try to just take a lot of steps back and think about, what does this really feel like for someone who doesn't want to do it? And the thing that really stuck with me is a client I had recently who told me that coming to me, and he had to come to me because he was about to do something for his company, very forward facing, and it was going to be on video, and he needed to get good. And he came to me and he's like, this is like going to the dentist. Like, nothing against you, Laurie. I just feel like coming to you, I dread it as much as I dread coming to the dentist. So that made me think, well, I think this stuff is fun. You, Jordan, you think this stuff is fun. You've got a podcast, you're out there, you're doing this. Most people don't. So that's really where I try to start with my clients and really just meet them where they are, understanding that, for most people, it's about as much fun as going to the dentist.
Well, it's or the Jerry Seinfeld skit, right? That the number one fear is public speaking, two is death. So at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than giving the eulogy.
Yes, I love that. I start a lot of presentations that way, and it's a lot of fun. So true. So true. Yeah.
So I'm curious, like from an organizational standpoint of this conversation, are there like the top 3 to 5 tips we can take from the courtroom into life that makes sense? Is that the right way for us to frame? All right. So let's do it.
Absolutely.
Our audience here is not all trial attorneys, but it's all mostly law firm owners, some of which may be doing estate planning or something else so they can stay as far away from a courtroom as possible. Other ones may be, reformed prosecutors such as you and I. So what are our most common courtroom lessons that we can apply to modern life from a communication standpoint?
I love how you asked that. So let's take it out of the courtroom. Let's take it into all sorts of other arenas that lawyers are in. So number one that I'd say is to be yourself. Okay? A lot of people think that public speakers or anyone giving any kind of presentation, that you're born that way, that there's this mold, how to do it. They're these extroverted people. They get up, they tell these great stories, and that it's a skill, that it's not something that's learned, like it's born. You have it when you're born. That could not be further from the truth. Some people have more talent than others, sure, just like anything, just like athletes, just like singers or performers, sure. But everybody has something unique to bring to presenting. Everyone has something unique to share. And that's what can really make all of your communication shine. So in court, I would watch people do things and I think that looks so great. I want to pound on that table like that my 6 foot tall, 200-pound friend. And then me, you can't see because I'm sitting 5'2", not 200 pounds, not giant, pounding on the table. I look like an idiot, because it wasn't me. I had to learn what worked for me and what was going to be my own unique style. And that's something you do through practice. And it really can take away a lot of the scariness of speaking when you realize you don't have to be someone else. You just have to be you. And to discover your own style, watch TED Talks, listen to podcasts, watch people who you may think are amazing speakers, see what they do that resonates with you, and think about how you can incorporate some things and make them your own. So just be yourself. That's my number one.
And I love the way you talk about that, like as a skill you can work on. Because I probably mention this, I don't know, once a month. But like Gary Vee, I think is one of the best speakers, a great personal brand. You can watch his first wine library video, and oh my God, it's like he's like all the way in the back with terrible lighting, and so this is a wine, and it's pretty bad. And he said that, so like it's fair. And you see the guy go from that to what he is today because of reps. And there's certainly some amount of talent, sure. But like the effort you put in, having that growth mindset like Carol Dweck talks about and really like putting in the reps will be night and day. And that's why, I love it from a podcast perspective because I can watch the first episode of this. We can go back 200 episodes and see how much better, we are, or same for anybody listening. It's very cool to watch yourself get better at something by putting in the time and effort.
And for some reason, people don't think of public speaking and communication as subject to that. It has this magical allure of you're just born a good speaker. Look at, Beyonce. Not that she hasn't always been amazing, but look at her when she was a kid performing and look at her, as she goes through the years. You're going to notice a marked difference. Look at athletes and where they start. I love figure skating. It's something I used to do. Michelle Kwan is my favorite figure skater. I can watch her at age 13 and she's at an incredibly high level. I think she was an alternate in the Olympics, and you watch her 4 years later and it's even more astounding. Even if you're good, you still need to keep practicing. And if you're not so good, you can really get there. You really, really can. So that's number one.
Yeah. And I think to go to your point of be yourself, the more you spend practicing trying to be somebody else, the more time you're wasting working on being the best you.
That was so perfect. I'm gonna have to write that down, Jordan. I really love that.
Go for it.
Awesome.
You can.
I can use it.
Yeah, there we go.
No, it is. It's very true. When you are expending energy into trying to be something you're not just, you're missing out on who you are, and you're missing out on all that time to get better. So that's one. I'd say number two is something that you touched on, is that idea of practice and preparation. It is so important to really get into the mindset of treating your communication, your public speaking, your media appearances, your podcast appearances as something that demands the same kind of practice and preparation as a court appearance or something else that you would really practice for. People don't want to practice talking. Nobody wants to listen to themselves, right? Nobody wants to watch themselves on video. I have clients say to me, like, do I have to watch myself? I say, well, if you want to get any better, yes, you have to watch yourself. It can be so painful. It can be so awful. You got to do it. You got to know what you sound like. You got to know what you look like. And you need to know how those words are coming out of your brain, out of your mouth, how they sound, and how it feels when you're doing it. You're not going to get any better if you don't do it. So you've got to put in the time, just like any other skill. You don't get to be a great runner, by not practicing. You don't get to be a great athlete, just like anything else in life. You've got to practice, really got to practice. You've got to prepare and be ready when that opportunity comes, when you're actually up there doing these things. You can't just think you get up there and wing it. The people who look good winging it are the people who have put in 30 hours of practice for their 20-minute TED Talk. That's how it is.
Well, and listen, full disclosure, friends, I hate the sound of my own voice. As weird as that sounds, as somebody who creates a shit ton of content all the time, I'm okay looking at myself. I don't know what that says about me, but I hate the sound of my own voice because I sound different. Like, I hear myself deeper than you hear me. But you have to do it. And to what Laurie's talking about, like, I'm filming this on an iPhone, on a tripod, on a bed in a hotel room. Like, it has never been easier to get really good quality video of yourself and really good sounding audio of yourself to hear it back. You don't need $10,000 worth of equipment. You've got, most modern phones will be phenomenal for this.
Yeah, well, that's what I recommend to people. If I'm working with a client who's preparing for some sort of presentation, I like to have my clients in their own time, sometimes do the presentation. They send it to me. I'm able to give them feedback, and we go back and forth on it. And I always tell them, just speak it into your phone. No one has to hear it. No one has to listen to it. It's just you. Do it into your phone, do it into the video. If it's too hard to watch the video at first, because people do get some real big hangups about that, listen to it first. If it's too hard to listen to it first, there are so many apps out there and so much AI and so many tools you can use to get the transcript. Read the transcript first. Take it in little baby steps till you get comfortable, because so much of being comfortable as a speaker and being out there is being comfortable with yourself. And that's really at the heart of it, because being out there speaking, putting yourself out in front of, either a crowd or, on a podcast, you're on video out there doing it, is really opening yourself up to vulnerability and possibly to judgment. Although honestly, we care more about it than anybody watching us does. But that's a huge part of what makes it so scary, and maybe why your son, even at such a young age, can look at that and say, Dad, were you scared doing that? Because there's something about it that's kind of scary. So just little baby steps and just starting to get comfortable with yourself is what's going to help you be a much better speaker.
And tech tip for what Laurie's talking about, Google Meet, you can pull a transcript in Google Meet. So if you record yourself in there, it is the best AI transcription I have seen, and it's completely free as long as you have a Google account, which you can get for totally free. So if you really need just the transcript, it's an easy way to go without spending any extra money.
That's awesome. I use Zoom quite a bit, like we're doing here. There's a tool called Fathom Plug, also a client of mine, but amazing. And with Fathom, it does the same thing, and it's already integrated into Zoom, and it's free.
Oh,
same thing, gives you a recording,
awesome.
gives you AI, gives you a transcript. So if you're not using Google Meet and you're using Zoom, give that a try too. Yeah,
There
same
we
thing.
go.
It's
I love it.
fantastic. Yeah. So we've got kind of being yourself. You've got being prepared and practicing. And then I'll just, put in.
I do want to chime
more.
in.
Yeah.
One thing
Please.
before we leave the practicing.
Yeah.
So there's the modern depiction, 10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell writes about it, and it's been confirmed in a number of studies. I just want to make sure everyone's clear. You can fake 10,000 hours, as crazy as it sounds. If you are just talking for 10,000 hours, you are not an expert. So like you need to do what Laurie's talking about, where it's recording, it's listening to it back, it's getting feedback. Like there's a way to waste the time, and there's a way to spend the amount of effort it needs. The more you practice what you preach, the more you practice right, the faster you will get better at this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like you're really going to get out of it what you put into it. There is no way to just read a book and become a great speaker. There's no way to just listen to a podcast and automatically be a great speaker. It would be awesome if there were, but it's not like that. You got to do it.
And get feedback and track it and try it and whatever it is. Like the coolest example comes from, I want to say it's Michael Jordan at the 86 Olympics, where like there's a trainer talking about how he would take 100 free throws and mark every single one. Was it too far left, too far right, too far, too close, whatever, and just go through, as opposed to just sitting there and like hoisting up a couple shots. It was very interesting to get that mindset of practicing with the right metrics. Maybe that's not the right word.
I think with some metrics and some data, and really breaking it down, because communication can be seen as this very intangible thing. Like, how do you know if it's good? How do you know if you're feeling better? You can give yourself some metrics. You can record yourself, listen to yourself, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How do I feel doing this? What's my confidence level? How do I think my voice sounds? Do I feel prepared? Rate yourself, keep practicing. And then you'll notice as you move through, you're going to get to a higher and higher rating for yourself. So that once the ratio of practice to confidence and practice to skill and practice to ability, just like you gave in your Gary Vee example, it's there. That ratio is hugely there. The more you practice, the better you're going to get, the better you're going to feel.
I love it. All right. So I cut you off. You were going on the next one as I chimed in about the practice stuff.
Yeah. No, that was very important. So this is one that's kind of two, right? Because I'm a lawyer and I'm going to mix up the rules to make them work right now. Okay. This is something that if you actually do it, and it's not that hard to do it, it will change all your presentations and make them better. Okay. And it's this: you have to start strong and you need to end strong. Okay? These concepts of primacy and recency. Okay, we remember and we're convinced by what we hear first, and we remember what we hear last. So this is really valuable real estate. The first thing you say. So in court, that can be your opening statement. That can be talking to a jury in voir dire when you're selecting a jury. But for the purpose of this, think your opening statement. Okay, that's what it is in the courtroom. And when you think of ending strong, for a trial lawyer, that's your closing argument. That's when you come and you tell the jury, you're going to find this person guilty, you're going to find them not guilty. That's your closing. These things apply to everything else. How many presentations have you heard where the person gets up and say, "Hi, I'm Laurie Gilbertson, and I'm going to talk to you about public speaking today"? You just want to fall asleep, right?
Done.
Like, done, right? You're bored already. Okay? People miss this opportunity. There is so much you can do, right? So a lot of presentations, I start with the Jerry Seinfeld joke that you talked about,
There
right?
we go.
Does anybody
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, the number one fear of most Americans, does anybody know what that is? And then we kind of go through it and end with the joke of, most Americans are more afraid of public speaking than death, which means they'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy at a funeral. It's a little bit of a joke. It gets people involved. It pulls them in, gets their attention, right? So you can do that. You can start with a question. How many people like public speaking? right? Nobody's going to raise their hand. And then you can talk about it a little bit. I got it. Jordan's raising his hand there. You can do that. You could tell a story. We really haven't touched on storytelling that much, and that's a huge part of speaking. Stories resonate. You have a story that you can start a presentation with, you're going to pull your audience in. Okay. So there's so many creative things you can do. What I recommend, do not start with your name and what you're talking about. Don't do it. Have someone introduce you. Okay. Have someone introduce you, much like Jordan does on his podcast here. You introduce the guest. I don't have to introduce myself. And then we just get into conversation. That's what you want to do in your presentation. Okay. Have someone else introduce you and then pull the audience in. Okay.
And then you want to scientifically, people believe somebody else more than you. So like, even if it's, like an agent announcing their own athlete or their own author or whatever it is, there's still an extra bump than that person talking about themselves, no matter how, I don't know, biased the speaker is, interested in the outcome. So even me wanting you to look good, introducing you, is better for people than you introducing yourself, wanting you to look good.
That's so interesting. I haven't heard that.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah. So now we will be in the courtroom asking judges to introduce the attorneys, which actually they do, right? They do introduce you and say, counsel, for the state, you will make your, opening argument. So they do that, I guess, a little bit. Not as nicely as you did today for me, but they do it a little. So in the same vein, ending strong. How many presentations have you gone to where, okay, it was really great talking to all of you. Any questions? And that's where people end, right? They just kind of peter off at the end. The end of a communication is the time to really kind of hammer home to your audience, like, what do you want them to leave with? What do you want them to leave with? What do you want them to do? What is it you've shared with them that you want them to walk away feeling? Okay? This is also incredibly valuable real estate in communication. And most people they peter right off. They end with questions and answers. They don't know how they are going to answer, like, oh, I ran out of time. Okay, great talking to you all. You got to know how you're going to end. Okay,
Laurie,
you got to know.
You're killing me here. The last presentation I gave, I ended on questions, and now I'm like, man, I should move the questions up, have the, final takeaway. Thank you.
We've all done it. We've all done it. It's one of those things, I think, that someone started doing it, and then we all thought that's how you do it. And questions are great, but what you can do is say, before I finish or before I conclude today, I want to take questions. Right. Are there any questions? Then you take your questions, and then you have your big finish.
I love it.
After that. Yeah. So end strong. I have read and I have seen to not end with video. I'm going to disagree with that. I happen to love video. Sometimes I think a 30-second video can get my point across better than I can. I think video is incredibly powerful. I think the visuals that are chosen well are incredibly powerful. So that's something I like to use to end sometimes. There's a great Michael Jordan commercial about the growth mindset. Maybe you've seen it, about him making, trying all these different shots and missing, and trying to make game-winning shots, however many times and missing, and then saying, that because I failed, that is why I succeed. It's beautiful. I've used that quite often in presentations to talk about just getting people to go out and just give it a shot, kind of do it, go out and try. So there's a myriad of things. The same way you can open, you can end. If you asked a question, answer the question. If you told a story, don't tell the ending, save it for the end. And then you just bookend it at the end, and you finish it up and say, remember when I told you about this person? Well, let me tell you how that ended up. Finish it off there. Be creative and do it. Yeah.
And that's like so much of what I like from a marketing perspective. I always try to tell my clients, like, let's start with the outcome in mind. Like, what do you want out of this? Okay, now let's work backwards from there. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that goes right in from the presentation. Like, what do you want people to do at the end of it? Great. Now I know where I want to end. And then what's the right beginning to it? And then like, what's the, the meat of the sandwich in the middle?
Totally. When I teach trial techniques to lawyers, we start with the closing, right? We start with, what are you going to argue to the jury at the end? what do you want people to do? And there's a great Yogi Berra quote that says something like, if you don't know where you're going, you don't know where you're going to end up or something like that.
You'll get somewhere else.
You'll get somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to start at the end. That's what you do in court. I knew some amazing trial attorneys who wrote their summations first. I thought it was incredible. I could never do it. I could think about it and maybe outline a little, but I knew some who wrote it first. That was incredible. But that's what you need to do. Where do you want your audience to go at the end? And then you get yourself there. So yeah, exactly right. Exactly where we need to be thinking.
Yeah, it's interesting, in law school, they teach us IRAC, or I don't, maybe it's different now. And I always found like you really want to go closer to like CRAC, like this is the conclusion, and then like here's why, and then close with it again, because then you're framing what to expect for people. And if they agree with you at the beginning, great, everything is confirmation. And if they don't, they're listening to see what proves the point, and then finishing strong. So I love the idea of breaking that story up in half, or asking the question and answering it. I mean, really keeping people's perspective. That's so cool.
Yeah, well, great trial lawyers are great storytellers, and great communicators are great storytellers. And trust me, my family will tell you I am a horrendous storyteller, but somehow I've managed to learn. Anybody can learn. If I can learn, anyone can learn. And storytelling that way is so powerful. You would never, you're not going to start a story without knowing how it ends up. So it's the same thing in your communication. A lot of the job of a really good trial lawyer, and therefore also like take it out of the courtroom, a really good communicator, is you are doing the work for your audience. You are breaking it down. You are making it interesting. You are curating it all together so that they can walk away with whatever it is you're sharing with them. And in order to do that work, you do have to really know how you're going to end. You have to really know how you're going to get them there throughout all of it. And that is what takes the time, takes the practice, takes all that preparation to really be able to do that, to cut out, all the fluff, to make it as concise as possible for them so that they can leave, really with the things that you've wanted them to know, that the way you want them to feel, and whatever that call to action is, whatever you want them to do. So those aren't things that just come at the end and you just throw them out there. These are really things that you have to think about beforehand.
Well, and okay, so from our audience of law firm owner listeners here, this doesn't have to be a trial. It doesn't have to be a presentation to a bunch of referral sources. I mean, this could be conversations with employees for, feedback. This can be consultations with clients and asking them to hire you at the end of a consultation. I mean, we can take these communication skills through everything that we're doing as law firm owners?
Absolutely. Through everything. All of this relates to every single form of communication. I mean, it goes on your website. What's the story you're telling on your website? It goes in the marketing like you do. What's the story you're telling there? How are you helping people? What's the problem you're solving for them? How are you making that easy for them to understand? And it does go in those just phone call, a phone call, a meeting, a chat, anything. Once you've gotten to kind of the heart of it, then it's really easy to communicate it. And then it's really easy for people to listen and understand exactly what you're trying to get across.
All right. So I was going to end on this question, but I'm not. I'll move it up so I know where I want to end. Is there anything you want to make sure that we cover in the last, what do we have, about 10 minutes? Is there anything that we missed, topics or things you want to make sure we get covered in here?
I think you have covered things really, really well. What I would say in just terms of mindset of looking at communication overall and taking it from the courtroom to, client meetings, the boardroom, media appearances, any of it is just that it all applies and that it is not a soft skill. I see it completely. People talk about, public speaking, presenting, even just any kind of communication, that it's a soft skill, that it's optional. If you view it as optional, it is really going to hamper you. And there are going to be barriers because you're not going to be able to take advantage of all the opportunities that come your way. You're not going to be able to necessarily get all your ideas across the way you want to. Once you lean into the fact that being able to communicate well doesn't necessarily mean being on a stage in front of 1,000 people, once you start doing that, you will be so surprised at how things just change, how things just start to flow, how it's so much easier.
Is that what soft skill means? Like it's not
Uh,
that as important?
that's what it seems to mean to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
see, I
You don't
always,
think so?
I don't know now that I'm thinking
Yeah.
about it. But from my perspective, I always tell people like I talk to a lot of attorneys about what they can get off their plate, and for a lot of them, consultations or the sales call is the last thing. And I always tell them like, great, because of that being a soft skill, like you know it more. It's a lot easier for you to tell your receptionist, hey, in these 12 things, send it here. That's a hard skill. And these things that like for me, I always meant soft skill from the standpoint of it was more unique in the moment.
Mm.
But I don't
I
know.
I like,
I gotta
I
look
mean,
this.
I like that interpretation. If we're
Yeah, I
used,
gotta look
if
this
we're,
up now.
me too. If we're going that way, communication is a soft skill and you need to
Yeah,
embrace it.
interesting. I don't know. I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna learn more today. Now that
I am
I've
too.
changed how I'm doing all my presentations, and now I'm looking. I want to look up what soft skill actually means, if it's a positive or a negative. All right. So I want to talk about our next episode. Then I'll come back. I've got my Laurie's final takeaway. I've got my question over here that I'm interested in. So I'm piquing your interest as we do the one last little admin stuff. Although next week we have a really cool conversation. So next week on July 20th, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So Thursday, we've got Wayne Pollock on. Wayne's the first person willing to have a conversation with me about this topic in the way that I want. We're talking about the future of copywriting in the era of AI. And I am so excited for this because we interviewed copywriters several months ago. About 80% of them were like, I am not learning ChatGPT. We did not hire any of those people. Instead, we found somebody who really is embracing the intersection of the traditional skill of a copywriter with AI. So Wayne, who's not the one we hired, but does a lot of this personal branding copywriting, I'm so excited to talk to him about this and how we utilize AI as a tool, not as a replacement to, actually being human when it comes to writing what we're talking about. So super cool chat. All right. That being said, Laurie, before we get to your final takeaway, here's my last question. How do we know that this is working? How do we know that we become better at communicating? What are the outcomes we start seeing or feeling to know that we're on the right track?
One of the intangibles is that you start feeling more confident. You don't feel quite as scared to do some of these things or take advantage of them. Some of the actual tangible outcomes are that once you start speaking, you get invited to speak more. Once you start putting yourself out there, people start responding. In terms of, say, a law firm owner who's going out and maybe doing some talking, you see more clients, you see more referrals, you see more business. Those are the tangibles that start coming in because you are effectively putting your message out there and you're effectively communicating not just your ideas, but also yourself. And that makes people want to work with you. So those are some tangibles.
You feel better about it and people ask you to do it. Like what a better what a better way to know that you're on the right track than you enjoying it and other people wanting to hear you do it more frequently.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So for anybody who's been watching or listening to this, who wants to connect with you more, who wants to hear what you have to say, who is smart enough to know they need some of this help, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
The best way is through connecting with me on my website. And it is Tribeca, named for right near where I used to live in New York, Blue Consulting. And there's form right on there. You can email me directly on there. It's laurieg@tribecablueconsulting.com. And just reach out. I'd love to talk to anyone about any of your communication needs or about whether you know the true meaning of soft skill, because Jordan and I are going to figure that one out.
There we go. I love it. We'll be soft skill experts by the end of this. All right. And that being said, for anybody who's listened for the last 50 something minutes, if they remember nothing you said, one, that's going to be a problem. They should go back and watch the episode again. But two, hypothetically, if they do, what would be your most important takeaway? How do we help as many law firm owners as possible be the exhibit A of a successful attorney, such as yourself?
I'm going to steal, and don't get me on the copyright, a little bit from Nike's slogan of just do it. That's what I recommend. Just do it. Just get started. Just pick one thing about your communication, about your speaking that you want to work on, and just start doing it. That could be making eye contact with people. That could be actually trying to have more phone calls. That could be maybe going out and actually giving a presentation. Just pick one little thing and just do it. You'll get comfortable with that. And then you can pick another little thing and layer it on top. Get comfortable with that. Pick another little thing. Maybe it's your voice. Maybe it's how you stand. Maybe it's doing a cool intro or a cool way to end things and not ending with Q&A, just one thing. And just keep layering all those. And then you're going to be an amazing, confident, clear speaker. And it's going to make you really happy, and it's going to help your business. And then you're going to be able to kind of tell other people like, yeah, this is how I got this way, and you should try it too. And keep spreading the word that this is a skill that can be learned and that you've done it.
I love it. Awesome. All right, Laurie, thank you so much for your time with us today. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened to this. And then we'll see you back here next week, 7:26 p.m. for the future of copywriting in the era of AI. The conversation that probably all of us need to be aware of, because it is here, it is coming, it's getting more common. So let's utilize it properly, because we can speak for the rest of our lives. We'll also be typing probably for the rest of our lives. Let's work together to make all of it as effective as possible. With that, have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Exhibit A Attorneys. If you're interested in becoming the Exhibit A of Successful Attorney, please check us out at legaleasemarketing.com, EASE.